saying a president could sell pardons, could sell military secrets, could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival.
Federal appeals court judges appear to be skeptical of the claim that Donald Trump is protected against criminal prosecution. Trump appeared in court Tuesday as he tries to get his federal election case dismissed. Our congressional correspondent Scott McFarland has details.
After arriving in a motorcade through the rain, Donald Trump sat in the front row as his attorney argued the 2020 election conspiracy criminal case against the former president must be dismissed.
To authorize the prosecution of a president for his official acts would open a Pandora's box from which this nation may never recover.
A trial judge rejected his claim of presidential immunity last year, saying a former president doesn't enjoy a get-out-of-jail-free card, which the prosecutor echoed today.
The president has a unique constitutional role, but he is not above the law.
All right, so let me ask you something. Do you remember back in 2024 when Donald Trump became the first former president in American history to be convicted of a crime? Yeah, that conviction, the hush money case, 34 felony counts for falsifying business records. The whole Stormy Daniels payment scandal that had everyone glued to their screens for weeks. Well, guess what? That conviction, the only criminal conviction Trump has ever faced, might be about to disappear, like completely wiped off the books. And it all comes down to one word that's been thrown around so much lately, it's starting to lose meaning: immunity. Come on, this is wild. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
The appeals court appeared skeptical too, with one judge calling it paradoxical for a president to swear an oath to uphold the law, yet be allowed to violate the law. Judge Florence Pan posed a pointed hypothetical to Trump's attorney.
Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first.
The judges also pressed Trump's attorney when he acknowledged the former president could be charged if he had been convicted by the Senate at his 2021 impeachment.
If Donald Trump could have been impeached and convicted and therefore could be prosecuted, then how can they argue immunity at the same time? It's a contradiction.
Though he claimed he was forced from the campaign trail by the case, Trump appeared in court voluntarily and addressed cameras at his former D.C. hotel after.
I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple.
Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, some pretty dramatic hypotheticals we heard today, including what if the president ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival. What stood out to you the most watching these proceedings?
Some of the terms used by Trump's attorney. Let's be mindful that Donald Trump was sitting in the front row right behind his attorney, who synthesized into his legal arguments a criticism of President Biden's handling of the border, a criticism of former President Clinton, and the attorney also made reference to Trump being the leader in all the polls. Jeff, that sounds like stuff from the campaign stump. And let's notice that Donald Trump was not campaigning today. He was in the courtroom and spoke after, kind of a mixture of legal strategy and political strategy here.
So here's what just happened. On November 6th, just a few days ago, a federal appeals court basically said, hold up, we need to take another look at this whole immunity thing. They ordered a lower court judge to reconsider whether Trump's hush money conviction should be thrown out because of, wait for it, presidential immunity. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, another Trump legal drama, hear me out. This isn't just about one guy dodging accountability. This is about something way bigger. This is about whether a president, any president, can basically do whatever they want while in office and never face consequences ever. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. But wait, didn't Trump pay off a porn star to keep quiet about an affair before the election? How is that an official presidential act? Great question. That's exactly the problem here. See, back in July of last year, the Supreme Court made this absolutely bonkers ruling that said presidents have broad immunity for their official acts. And when I say broad, I mean broad. Like so broad that even one of the Supreme Court justices, Justice Sotomayor, wrote in her dissent that this immunity ruling lies about like a loaded weapon. A loaded weapon. Those were her actual words. Can you believe this? So now we've got this appeals court saying, hey, maybe Trump's conviction needs to be reconsidered in light of this new immunity standard. And the timing? oh, the timing is perfect or terrible, depending on how you look at it. Because here's the thing, Trump is currently serving his second term as president. He won the election back in 2024, beat Kamala Harris, and got inaugurated in January of this year. So we're talking about a sitting president who's trying to use his current position to erase a conviction from before he even took office this time around. Let that sink in for a second. This is the same case where Trump was found guilty by a jury of cooking the books to hide payments made to keep damaging stories quiet right before an election. Payments that were disguised as legal fees. Payments that prosecutors said were made specifically to influence the outcome of an election. And now there's a real chance that conviction just goes away. Poof, gone. The judge who originally rejected Trump's attempt to move this case to federal court, Judge Alvin Hellerstein, he basically said, nah, this is a state conviction. It stays in state court. But this appeals panel, they're saying Hellerstein might not have fully thought through how this new Supreme Court immunity ruling changes things. So what does that mean? It means we're back to square one. It means Trump gets another bite at the apple. Another chance to argue that somehow, some way, paying off a porn star and hiding it with fake invoices was actually part of his official duties, as well as what exactly? As a candidate, as a businessman, as president, this is wild. And here's why this matters right now, today, in November of 2025, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. This is happening while Trump is actively serving as president. This is happening while the country is watching to see whether our justice system actually means anything. This is happening while half the country thinks Trump can do no wrong, and the other half thinks he's gotten away with everything. This immunity fight, it's not just about Trump. It's about what we're willing to accept from our leaders. It's about whether being president means you're above the law. And it's about whether the Supreme Court just handed every future president a get-out-of-jail-free card that makes the actual monopoly version look like nothing. Are you kidding me? Think about what we're really talking about here. We're talking about a system where someone can commit crimes, get caught, get convicted by a jury of their peers, and then potentially have all of that erased just because they managed to win an election and become president. That's not justice. That's not accountability. I don't even know what that is. And the craziest part, this could actually work. Like Trump's lawyers might actually pull this off. Not because the law is on their side necessarily, but because the Supreme Court made the law so vague and so broad that nobody really knows what's legal anymore when it comes to presidential immunity. So buckle up, because what started as a hush money case about a porn star and some shady bookkeeping, yeah, that's now turned into a constitutional crisis about the limits of presidential power. And honestly, nobody knows how this is going to end. But one thing's for sure, we're all about to find out just how much power a president really has, and whether that power includes the ability to erase their own criminal record. All right, so let's dig into what's actually happening here, because I guarantee you, most people are getting this story completely wrong. They're either thinking Trump's getting off again because he's corrupt, or they're thinking Trump's finally beating these witch hunt charges. And both of those takes are missing the actual point. So let me break down the timeline, because the timeline here is absolutely crucial to understanding why this is such a mess. Back in 2016, right before the election, Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 to keep quiet about an alleged affair. Then, Cohen got reimbursed by Trump. But here's the kicker. Those reimbursements were disguised as legal fees. They were labeled as payments for legal services in Trump's business records. Fake invoices. Fake everything. Fast forward to 2024. Trump gets charged, goes to trial, gets convicted on 34 felony counts, each count representing a falsified business record. And for a minute there, it looked like Trump was actually going to face some consequences, like maybe the system works after all. But then the Supreme Court drops this immunity bomb. In July of 2024, the Supreme Court ruled on a completely different case, Trump versus United States, which was about Trump's actions related to January 6th. And in that ruling, they said presidents have absolute immunity for core constitutional duties and broad immunity for other official acts. Now, when they say official acts, what do they mean? Great question. Nobody really knows. That's part of the problem. The Supreme Court basically said, yeah, presidents are immune for official stuff, but they didn't really define what counts as official. And this is where it gets interesting, because Trump's legal team immediately jumped on this. They were like, see, immunity, that applies to everything, including the hush money case. At first, Judge Hellerstein was like, nah, nice try. But this conviction happened in state court for stuff you did as a private citizen. So no, you can't just move this to federal court and claim immunity. He rejected Trump's attempt to transfer the case. But now, this appeals court is saying, hold on, Judge Hellerstein, you might need to think about this harder. They're not saying Trump is right. They're not saying the conviction should be thrown out. They're just saying, given this new immunity standard from the Supreme Court, maybe you didn't fully consider how that changes things. So what's going to happen next? Judge Hellerstein has to take another look. He has to reconsider whether any part of the evidence used in Trump's conviction involved official acts that should have been protected by immunity. And here's where this gets really sticky, because some of the evidence in the hush money trial included things that happened after Trump became president in 2017. Like there were communications, there were discussions about the payments, there were reimbursements that continued into his first presidency. Trump's lawyers are arguing that anything that happened while he was president is an official act and should be immune, even if it's covering up something that happened before he was president. Can you believe this? So now we've got this situation where prosecutors are like, wait, no, paying off a porn star isn't an official act, and Trump's team is like, everything a president does is official because he's the president. And honestly, the Supreme Court's ruling is so vague that, yeah, Trump might have a point. Not a good point, not a fair point, but technically, maybe a legal point. Let's talk about what Justice Sotomayor said, because her dissent in that original immunity case was absolutely scathing. She wrote that this immunity ruling lies about like a loaded weapon ready to be used by future presidents. She warned that this decision effectively places the president above the law. She said the majority was creating a law-free zone around the presidency. And like she was right, because here we are, 5 months later, and that loaded weapon, Trump's lawyers just picked it up and pointed it straight at his only criminal conviction. This is wild. Now let's think about what this means for accountability, because that's really what this is about. If Trump can use presidential immunity to erase a conviction for crimes committed before he was even president this time, what does that say about our system? It says that if you can become president, you can potentially erase your past. It says that the highest office in the land isn't just powerful, it's a shield, a permanent, impenetrable shield against consequences. And I'm not even being dramatic here. Think about the precedent this sets. Let's say a future presidential candidate commits a crime, gets caught, gets convicted, then wins the election. Can they just wave their hand and make it all go away because now they're president? Is that really where we are? Come on. The American public is watching this play out in real time, and the reactions are predictably split. Trump supporters are celebrating. They're saying finally the persecution ends. This was always a political witch hunt. Trump critics are losing their minds. They're saying this is exactly what we warned about. He's above the law. The system is broken. And you know what? Both sides are kind of right. Because yeah, this case was politically charged. Everything involving Trump is politically charged. But also, yeah, he did falsify business records. A jury found him guilty. That's not nothing. But here's what most people aren't talking about. This isn't just about Trump anymore. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling opened a door. And once that door is open, it's really hard to close. Future presidents are going to use this. Democrats, Republicans, doesn't matter. When you give someone power and tell them they're immune from consequences, they're going to use that power. And the timing of this appeals court decision, let's be real, Trump is currently serving as president. He's got the full weight and resources of the executive branch behind him, his Justice Department, his lawyers, everything. And now he's using all of that to fight a conviction from before his current term even started. It's like, imagine you got a speeding ticket last year, then you become a police chief, and you use your new position to argue that actually that speeding ticket should be thrown out because now you're in charge of law enforcement. That's essentially what's happening here, just, with way higher stakes. The legal experts are divided on this. Some say Judge Hellerstein is going to look at this again and say, nope, still not buying it. This conviction stands. Others think the Supreme Court's immunity ruling is so broad that Trump might actually have a shot at getting this conviction overturned. And that's the scariest part. Nobody knows. The law is so unclear right now that legitimate legal scholars can't even agree on what's going to happen. That's not how justice is supposed to work. That's not certainty. That's chaos. Let's also talk about the specifics of what the appeals court actually said, because it matters. The 3-judge panel from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals didn't just randomly decide to give Trump another chance. They pointed to specific concerns about whether Judge Hellerstein adequately considered the new immunity framework from the Supreme Court. The panel said that the lower court may not have fully analyzed how the Supreme Court's decision about immunized official acts applies to evidence that was used in the state trial. And that's a huge deal, because if even a small portion of the evidence shouldn't have been admitted because it involved official acts, the entire conviction could be tainted. Think about that. The prosecution built their case using all sorts of evidence, testimony, documents, communications. And if Trump's lawyers can argue that some of that evidence came from his time as president, and if a judge agrees that presidential immunity protects that evidence, then the prosecutors might not be able to prove their case anymore. It's like building a house of cards. Pull out one card, the whole thing collapses. So where does this leave us? It leaves us waiting, again, waiting for Judge Hellerstein to reconsider, waiting to see if Trump's only criminal conviction survives, waiting to see if presidential immunity really does mean a president can do anything without consequences. And in the meantime, Trump is sitting in the White House, governing, making decisions, appointing judges, all while fighting to erase the one time he was actually held accountable for something. This is wild, and it's only going to get wilder. Okay, so let's break this down into simple terms. because there's a lot of legal jargon flying around and it's easy to get lost. Here are the core things you need to understand about what's happening right now. First, this is about one conviction. Trump has faced multiple investigations, multiple charges, multiple cases, but this hush money conviction is the only one that actually stuck. It's the only time he was found guilty by a jury. And now that conviction is in serious jeopardy because of this immunity ruling. Second, the Supreme Court's immunity decision from July 2024 changed everything. Before that ruling, it was pretty clear that presidents could be held accountable for criminal acts, especially acts committed before they took office or outside their official duties. But now there's this huge gray area about what counts as an official act and what doesn't. Third, the appeals court isn't saying Trump wins, not yet. They're just saying the lower court judge needs to reconsider the case with this new immunity standard in mind. But here's the thing, that's actually a big deal, because if Judge Hellerstein changes his mind, if he decides that some of the evidence shouldn't have been used because it involved official acts, then the whole conviction could fall apart. Fourth, this sets a dangerous precedent, and I mean dangerous for everyone, regardless of your politics. If a sitting president can use immunity to erase convictions from before their current term, what's to stop future presidents from doing the same thing? What's to stop them from committing crimes, running for president, winning, and then claiming immunity? Let me put it another way. The Supreme Court basically created a superpower for presidents, and Trump is the first one to really test how far that superpower goes. He's pushing the boundaries, seeing what he can get away with, and if it works, every future president is going to try the same thing. Now, let's talk about what happens next. Judge Hellerstein has to review the case again. He has to decide whether the Supreme Court's immunity ruling changes his original decision. And honestly, he's in a tough spot, because if he sticks to his guns and says, nope, conviction stands, Trump will just appeal again. This could go back up to higher courts, maybe even back to the Supreme Court. But if Hellerstein changes his mind, if he says, okay, yeah, maybe some of this evidence was problematic, then prosecutors have to figure out if they can still make their case without that evidence. And if they can't, Trump walks. The conviction gets overturned, and that's it, done. Can you believe this? Let's also talk about the political implications, because come on, everything Trump does has political implications. He won the 2024 election. He beat Kamala Harris. He's currently serving his second term as president, and now he's using that position to fight his legal battles. His supporters see this as vindication. They're saying, see, we told you it was all political. We told you the charges were bogus. They view this appeals court decision as proof that the system is finally correcting itself. His critics see this as corruption. They're saying, of course he's getting away with it again. Of course the courts are bending over backwards to protect him. They view this as more evidence that Trump is above the law and always has been. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Trump did falsify business records. That's not really in dispute. The evidence was pretty clear. The jury convicted him. But also the legal landscape changed after his conviction. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling did create new questions about what evidence should have been allowed. So what does this mean for average Americans? Why should you care about some arcane legal fight over presidential immunity? Here's why. Because this isn't just about Trump. This is about the future of accountability in America. This is about whether we're a nation of laws or a nation of men. This is about whether someone can become so powerful that the rules just don't apply to them anymore. If Trump gets this conviction overturned, it sends a message. And that message is simple. If you're powerful enough, if you can reach the presidency, you're untouchable. Your past doesn't matter. Your crimes don't matter. Nothing matters except the immunity that comes with the office. And yeah, I know some people are going to say, but what about Bill Clinton? What about other presidents who did questionable things? And sure, fair point, but none of them had a Supreme Court ruling that gave them this kind of blanket immunity. None of them had this kind of legal shield to hide behind. This is new territory. This is uncharted waters, and we're all just watching it happen in real time. Let's also talk about trust in institutions, because that's really what's at stake here. Half the country already thinks the justice system is rigged against Trump. The other half thinks the justice system is rigged in his favor. In cases like this, they just make everyone more convinced that they're right. If the conviction stands, Trump supporters will say it's political persecution. If the conviction gets overturned, Trump critics will say it's corruption and favoritism. Either way, nobody wins. Trust in the system keeps eroding. People keep getting more divided. And the idea that we have fair, impartial justice, yeah, that keeps getting harder to believe. Here's another thing to consider. This case involves Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer who went to prison for his role in this whole scheme. Cohen pleaded guilty to campaign finance violations related to the exact same payments that Trump was convicted for disguising. So Cohen went to jail, but Trump might get his conviction erased? Are you kidding me? How does that make any sense? How is it fair that the lawyer goes to prison, but the guy who ordered the payments and signed the checks might walk free? And the only reason Trump might get away with it is because he became president? That's not justice. That's privilege. That's power protecting power. And let's talk about the actual crime for a second, because sometimes it gets lost in all the legal mumbo jumbo. Trump falsified business records. He took payments that were reimbursements for hush money and he labeled them as legal fees in his company's books. That's fraud. That's cooking the books. That's the kind of thing that gets regular people thrown in jail. But because Trump became president, suddenly there's this question of whether he should face consequences at all. Suddenly we're debating immunity and official acts and whether evidence should have been admitted. Come on, this is wild. Now let's think about the broader implications for democracy. Because yeah, I'm going to go there. If presidents can use immunity to escape accountability for crimes, what does that do to our system of checks and balances? The whole idea of American democracy is that nobody is above the law, not even the president, especially not the president. But if the Supreme Court's immunity ruling means that presidents can basically do whatever they want, then that principle is dead, it's gone, it doesn't exist anymore. And that should terrify everyone, because today it might be Trump using this immunity to his advantage. Tomorrow, it could be someone else, someone you don't like, someone you don't trust. And if we establish the precedent that presidents are immune from consequences, we can't take it back later just because we don't like who's in office. The rules have to apply to everyone, or they don't really mean anything. So what's the bottom line here? The bottom line is that Trump's only criminal conviction, the hush money case that seemed like a done deal, is now very much back in play. An appeals court has ordered a fresh look at whether presidential immunity should void that conviction. And depending on how Judge Hellerstein rules, we could see that conviction disappear entirely. This matters because it's not just about one case or one conviction. It's about the principle. It's about whether presidents are above the law. It's about what kind of accountability, if any, we can expect from our leaders. And right now, the answer is we don't know. The law is unclear. The precedents are being written in real time. And Trump is at the center of it all, pushing, testing, seeing how far he can go. One more thing. This is all happening while Trump is actively serving as president. He's making policy decisions. He's appointing judges. He's running the country. And simultaneously, he's fighting legal battles to erase his past convictions. The same power he's using to govern, he's also using it to protect himself. That should concern everyone, regardless of your politics, because today is Trump. Tomorrow it could be someone else. And if we don't figure out where the lines are, if we don't establish clear boundaries around presidential immunity, then we're basically saying that whoever sits in the Oval Office can do whatever they want without consequences. Is that really the America we want to live in? Is that really the system we want to pass down to future generations? Because once we go down this road, once we accept that presidents are immune from accountability, there's no going back. The precedent is set, the door is open, and every future president will walk right through it. So keep your eyes on this case. Keep watching to see what Judge Hellerstein decides. Keep paying attention to how the courts handle presidential immunity going forward. Because what happens here is going to shape American politics and law for generations. And that's not hyperbole, that's just reality. The loaded weapon Justice Sotomayor warned about, yeah, it's been fired, and we're all waiting to see where the bullet lands. This is wild, and honestly, it's only going to get wilder from here. The fight over Trump's immunity isn't ending anytime soon. If anything, it's just getting started. And we're all going to have to live with the consequences of whatever happens next, whether that means a president who's truly accountable to the law or a president who's above it entirely.